Welcome everyone to another episode of the Wordness to the Nerdness podcast, a show where nerdy guys talk about games, movies, TV, and everything else in the nerdy universe today. You can currently find our podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and now YouTube. So long as this video I just uploaded actually loads up, we'll see. There's only one up there right now, but by the time you hear this, maybe there'll be two. And then we have a new episode each and every Thursday. If you want to reach out to us, you can follow us at Words to the Nerds on Twitter. I am joined by the runner, Curtis Potter.
What's happening?
We are missing Florida man Sean, but we also have Mr. 1v1 me on Rust, Sam Benny.
Oh, man. I'm surprised you even know what that is, Groat.
I don't, but I know you do.
Yeah, I know exactly what it means.
Yeah, I'm lost. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll just say many young Benny disputes were decided on Rust.
That was like college time for me. I just wasn't interested.
Man,
I know it was my bad.
You missed out on prime online gaming.
But did I though? Because I feel like I came in like just in the right time.
No, like dude, like I'm so, like it goes in moments, you know, like it's good and then bad, and like that's up there with like Halo 3 custom game days, like MW2. It's just
I feel like I saved myself from like just multiple kids like banging my mom, you know?
Yeah. It was the L you had to take for one of the best online multiplayer games you'll ever play.
Damn.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
You know, you live and you learn, I guess. I'll just have to one day when I have kids tell them to not miss out on fucking I don't know
another MW2, bro. There was very specific circumstances that made that game the way it was.
I guess that's true.
That's why I played a lot on mute and didn't have a headset on, just because like I don't care if I don't communicate.
That was the best part. See, the thing that made MW2 so special, I know we're going way off topic here, but like the thing that made it so special is every single game mode, it would force you to, except for like Ground War and Mercenary Team Deathmatch, which you couldn't go in with like a set team. The game would force you to go to game chat, even if you were in a party separate. Like it would force you out of the party. Otherwise, you get kicked from the game. So you had to be in game chat. So every person playing is in game chat. Everyone's mic quality sounds like straight potato.
Yeah. It's always the worst.
It was always the worst
whenever you would like get in a party of like people don't know, and then someone just be like blaring whatever music they were listening to in the background. You're like, man, I don't want to hear this, but now I'm forced to.
Dude, I think one of my favorites that I always vividly remember is like there's always that one dude every now and then that's like rapping into the mic, right?
Right.
I just remember this guy going, "You know who it is. You already know who it is," and you'd say that before you'd start anything. I'd be like, "Nah, man, I don't know who it is. Who are you?" You'd get all upset and start over.
Damn. It's all right. See, we're not going off topic because I haven't even said what the topic is yet today. I guess everyone is going to read the thumbnail.
We're just going to talk about MW2 lobbies.
I'd rather not, though.
That's what mine's going to be. That's what we're going to talk about.
So, since we are putting these on YouTube now, we're going to get a few possibly different listeners that we didn't have before. So, those of you wondering, and you're starting on episode 26 and not knowing what we're all about, the reason why like we started later is because we kind of did a change up and we're now putting these on YouTube. I may eventually put episodes 1 through 25 on there as well, but I mean, again, none of these have video to watch. So if you listen on YouTube and you do want to listen to some of our previous episodes, it is on, where I mentioned earlier, iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Spotify. But we will start. We're getting there. We're slowly but surely learning. And
when's Jay-Z gonna get us on Tidal?
Dude, I heard soon. But
I feel like we could get a real good exclusive deal over there.
Maybe, you know,
sell out as soon as we can.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's always the goal, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anyone that starts a business, the whole point is to sell it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going for. We're just cash cow money grubbing bastards here, just trying to suck all the money from everyone.
Yeah, would you like to franchise your own Wordness to the Nerdness?
Yeah.
Podcast?
Send some money to my Patreon, and I'll send you pictures of my stomach hair back.
Oh.
The one day where like this is how I feel we should do it, and maybe it's optimistic of me, but the one day where we get like, man, you guys do good work, like how can I support you? Is like when I feel like I should put that stuff out there. But until then, I don't want to be like, oh yeah, give us your money because I'm not. Well, I guess Sam, it could be goes towards the
send
Sam
Groat
fund, so he can
inappropriate pictures on his Twitter every day.
Oh, please don't. Please don't. I'm making it easier and easier to find me, so I'm starting to get worried.
Yeah. Your life's on blast.
This is your fault. You did this.
I know I did this to us. But you know what? If I go down, you're all going down with me. All right, so suck it.
That's right. We'll
Man,
play the band.
I ain't even out of college yet, bro. I'm at a very tender point in my life. I could fall flat any second now.
Well, I'm here to throw it all to hell. You know? If it's not that I can succeed, others must fail. Isn't that what you said? Didn't you post that at some point? Or maybe Sean was posting that about you.
Yeah, it sounds like something I would say.
Well, before, I don't know how long this is, guys. I'll give you a topic for those of you that have listened, that stayed around this long and don't know. but last week we talked about GameStop and like the history of where it started. This week we're gonna go a little bit further back than GameStop, but we're gonna basically talk about the father of video games, essentially, and we're gonna talk about Nolan Bushnell. Now, there's been you'll listen to it as I go on about this of kind of like the character he is, but I think it's pretty interesting. So definitely stick around and listen to that. However, what we did before on like the previous 25 podcasts is that we basically talk about the gaming news that was going on during the week. And I'm trying to stay away from that now. However, since I do think we're going to have a little bit more time in this episode, I want to make sure we go past an hour. There is one thing that kind of came out recently today I want to talk about, but the loot box deal actually is starting to make a little bit of headway.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Curtis, you posted that. Do you want to talk about it a little bit? Because I was reading, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting.
I didn't actually get to read all of it.
Oh,
to be honest, I know like Microsoft, all the big like consoles are like trying to get together to like I guess make like a standard or.
Well, they have to post like the actual chances of getting anything in loot boxes now moving forward. Forced to do that, which is I know they've been doing that in China since last year, but now
yeah, and from what I've heard, there's a possibility when they go over to China, they change the actual drop rate so they don't look as bad.
Yeah, well, and I know like Nintendo now in their mobile games just outright show the drop rates, so I don't know if they're required to or what. But
I'm a degenerate who plays Fire Emblem Heroes, and they tell you, how you got your 3% chance to get the thing you actually want.
Yeah, right. Animal Crossing is the same. It's like 0.000 something percent. I'm like, I didn't even know numbers went that far down on
That's
decimal.
That's funny.
But yeah.
So interesting news. Thought that came up today, and I thought, we'll throw that in. But yeah, I'm curious to see. I mean, if anything else changes from that.
It's a step forward. I mean, it's something good for us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Yeah. Well, and then they also have publishers on board too. They have, they have Activision, Blizzard, Bandai Namco, Bethesda, Bungie, Electronic Arts, Take-Two, and Ubisoft. All these, which are huge. So they're shooting for 2020 to have this all, I guess transparent. I don't know. It's probably, I guess, the right thing to say.
I mean, they have to be on board. If they don't cooperate, it just gets worse for them. So.
I honestly don't even think it's like I don't think it's going to change anything either. Like the people that would buy stuff are going to buy it anyway. It's kind of like, You remember when they started putting the calories on food, like at McDonald's, and you're like before, it's like, oh, it's like we don't know. Like I was so unaware of what I was eating. Like how was I supposed to know that eating 3 Big Macs was going to be 3,000 calories? But now it clearly says it. But it's not going to keep you from eating 3 Big Macs if that's what you want to do.
I feel like it helps.
You know?
I mean, like, I'm more willing to wail on something if I know what I'm wailing for.
Yeah. Honestly, I thought of that food analogy exactly the same because I'm like, I fucking hate that they put the calories. Also, I love that they put the calories. So I probably will feel the same way with the loot boxes, you know?
I mean, I remember like the first time I saw it at like Taco Bell, I was like, damn, a Crunchwrap Supreme has like 600 calories? That's crazy. Yeah, can I get 2 Crunchwrap Supremes?
Well, what cracks me up is they'll put at the bottom the daily allotment is whatever, and then like there'll be a meal nearby that's more than the daily allotment. I'm like, Jesus Christ, so much. Yeah. But well, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see if it does much. But I mean, it's a step in the right direction. I mean, whatever. Let's go with it. I mean, if it keeps people from spending more money than they should, then it's a win. So hopefully it does work that way.
Yeah, we shall see though.
But, well, are you guys ready for me to talk your ear off?
Yeah.
So last time I kind of put in the actual like docket places where we'll pause, but I'll kind of bring you guys in for some of the parts that I want to pause at. Again, I was like kind of like rushing through this, and then I was finishing this today at work, which was a bad idea because I was busy. But I was able to pop in and do things. I got most of it done last night, so I was glad. I just had to tweak a few things and get a few extra items in here. However, that being said, all of this I'm pulling primarily from articles and also Wikipedia, which I know, slap on the wrist. Wikipedia can be changed, altered. It's not always verifiable. However, I won't put something in there that's like only on Wikipedia that I can't verify somewhere. If I look at it, I'm like, this doesn't look too right. I'll try and verify it other places. Also, the book, the Ultimate Video Game History Guide, I think that's what it is. There's a bunch of words to it. Anyway, I started listening to that chapter a bunch too of when you're talking about that, and had a bunch of interesting stuff in there as well. So I made sure to include that in here. So, however, if I am wrong, those of you guys listening, you want to put a comment down there, say, hey, that is not true, that is false. I will, gladly acknowledge when my fault or if I miss something. So keep us honest. But I think this is going to be very fascinating for those of you who don't know. The father of video game history. Here we go. So, wow, damn it. I even wrote my lead into this and I just led into this. So let me read forward a little bit and see. Okay. All right. So Nolan Bushnell, we'll be primarily covering him today, but also we're going to cover a bunch of Atari, which is mainly what he's known for. But the story is not going to be on Atari. It's going to basically be on Nolan. So once we get out of the Atari part, I'll kind of finish up of what Atari ends up doing, but not as much detail as if we are doing like an episode.
They're dead, but
just
technically not.
I know, and it's pretty crazy. But so last week we were talking about GameStop. We were talking about like mismanagement. This one isn't even so much mismanagement. This is more of like Nolan Bushnell is a guy that seems to me like he's never complacent. Like he can't just be doing one thing. He has to do multiple things. And a lot of the times he was stretching himself so thin that
they got very caught up. The vision was there when it happened.
Yeah, ahead of his time, and the tech bubble.
Mainly video games.
No, this one isn't so tech bubble. The video game crash in 1983 was the result for most of his failures. But we'll get to this. We'll get to that part. Anyway, one thing that I want you all to take from this episode is just that Nolan. It's not just Nolan, but how many brilliant minds were involved with the video game industry in the beginning as well. The pioneers of this industry saw that gaming could be shaped, and shape the industry Oh, sorry, I cannot read my. I
We're
did
off
not.
to a wrong start,
I was gonna go anyway. We're off to a wrong start, but okay. Basically, let me finish this part up. Like Nolan Bushnell is like one of the fathers of the video game industry, but it wasn't just him. Of like these names I'm gonna point out there that like were in here in the beginning that like saw the money in this, and what used to be like the video game industry used to not be a thing just 20 30 years ago, well 30 years ago, to now 100 billion plus industry. And it's from a bunch of these guys I'm going to mention that including Nolan Bushnell that started it. So there's some controversial things with them as well, but I'll add all the facts. You guys decide what you think of the man. So Nolan Bushnell, born February 5th, 1943 in Clearfield, Utah. He was raised a Mormon and in a Mormon household, Mormon community, whatnot, but he left Mormonism and Utah early in his life. Just to speak a little bit about the kind of guy Nolan Bushnell was. His father was a cement contractor, and he passed away in 1958, leaving several unfinished construction jobs all over the place. Nolan at the time was 15 years old, and he completed all of those open contracts.
Jeez.
At that age. So I'm like, that's pretty impressive. Those are some big shoes to fill when you're 15.
I feel lazy now.
Right? I was like, that's crazy. Because the thing is, like with the contract jobs, you get paid beforehand, maybe half, and then you get the other half later. I don't know how it was there, but I'm assuming a lot of these jobs they got the bid up front, and they just had to hopefully come under. So all this money was already paid, and he's just coming in and finishing these contracts. So yeah, that would be very interesting. Anyway, he went to Utah State University in 61, but he would finish school with an electrical engineering degree at the University of Utah College of Engineering in 1968. It was at that school when he was there where he was one of few people to actually play one of the first games ever. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it, but it was called Space War. No, it wasn't.
Was it the text-based one where you had to
I was thinking of his. He made a clone of it that's called Computer Space, but the original one was called Space War, and it wasn't the first computer game, but it was it was the first game that was, I guess, downloaded or transferred on other computers. Like before, if a computer was built and it had a game on it, that is the only computer that would have that game on it. Space War was the first one that was actually able to be used on other computers.
That's cool.
So, but anyway, they had it at the college that he was at. Him and his professor went to go check it out, and ever since that point, he was just fascinated with computer games. So. That kind of 1968 was where he really got a feel for this industry. After college, he worked for the company Ampex, which is still around today, where he would meet, and I'm going to say this loosely, I'm going to quote friend because he wasn't the best friend, so I'm gonna put this.
He's using air quotes with his hands.
Yeah,
just to visualize.
So those of you that can't see me, which
I'm
none of you can,
imagining air quotes, but like Mr. Krabs' claws, like big meaty claws.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this guy he met there at Ampex was one Mr. Ted Dabney, and together these two would start the company that would change the video game industry. I mean, you could call it the time, but they basically started in the video game industry and changing it forever. Mm-hmm. Do you know what company they started?
Do tell.
I want you guys to say everything, but that's all right. It's everyone thinks it's not Atari right away.
Because actually, I knew, I'm like, it can't. If he's asking, it's not Atari.
Right.
Yeah, I can't pronounce that. So it's a bunch of letters and.
Yeah. Here, let me fix this. Well,
I see it, but yeah.
It's the company was called Cxdy.
That really rolls off the tongue.
That's what they were going to go for. Which I read this, but I can't remember. But Cxdy is something about constellation alignments. I don't know. Anyway, it's kind of fascinating, but that's what they named it after. And so they started in 1969, and the two, Dabney and Bushnell, would work on a Space War clone, and this is the one I was thinking of before, called Computer Space. The game was a coin-op machine. It was actually the first ever video arcade game. A lot of people think it's Pong. Actually, this game, Computer Space, was the first one ever created, and to help keep the company afloat while they were doing like the research and development and trying to get this up and coming, they would actually fix pinball machines. It was like part of their side job.
And this was a table. This was a tabletop game, right? Like it sat on a bar or something. Is that
no? This was an arcade. Like this
was actual cabinet and everything.
Yeah, okay. Cabinet and everything.
I'm thinking way too early then.
But it was just like a clone of Space War. I mean, it was like almost the same exact game, if not like everything. Where they may have like tweaked a couple things, but other than that, nothing was much noticeable. And you'll actually see a lot of this as we go on. However, even though this is the first arcade machine, and he sold around 1,300 to 1,500 units, there wasn't like a precise number with it. It was considered a commercial failure. So I thought that was kind of interesting, especially since the start of it. But I mean, it was so new for people. People weren't used to that. They were selling these at the the pinball arcades, if you're in there. But I mean, at the time, it's so new. It's just one game. There's different pinball games out there, so they're just getting used to it. So after the failure of Computer Space, they had another problem, which in 1972, they found out that Cxdy was the name of another company. It was already taken, actually, by two companies out there. One was a roofing company, and then another, I can't remember what the other one was.
Out of all the names.
All the thing.
Yeah, so weird. That's what I was thinking. But the thing is, like, it's weird for me to think that of like names that we see now, it's like how some of the stuff may have not been taken, because if Cxdy was taken then, what they decided to do was like, all right, Nolan was like, okay, we got to think of something else. And so he was thinking of a phrase that was like similar to check and chess. He was thinking of something that you'd use for his favorite game, Go. And he used the Chinese word of it, which was Atari, which I guess kind of like translate to like hit the target. I saw different things like hit the target. It's like, check and chess for it. There's a few different things for it, but yeah. So Atari was what they came up with. And it's like, I mean, it's a cool name. It kind of rolls off the tongue, but the way they had to think of it is like that's crazy that it had to be the Chinese word for what check and chess is for Go.
But yeah, that's
cool. So they changed the name to Atari, and he would also work on their first successful arcade game, which was Pong. Now, Pong was massive. It was everywhere. Everyone loved it. But I need to take a step back a little bit, because there's two people that you need to like know about like during this transition here. So first, one of the important changes that happens is that Pong wouldn't have been successful if it wasn't for an ex-coworker that Nolan knew back at Ampex, who was Alan, which he goes like Alcorn. And he basically was the brains behind the game, which technically Pong was a ripoff, and later they would get sued for, but it was a ripoff of a Magnavox Odyssey game, whatever, which was basically Pong. But the difference is that Pong had sound, and it also had a tally mark so you can keep score. That was like the only difference in this. Other than that, it was a complete ripoff of this Magnavox Odyssey. And he lied about so Al Alcorn was actually like pretty like well off at Ampex, and it's already an established company. And he was lied to by Nolan, saying that he had deals with General Electric to try and bring him over. So he brought him over, and none of that was true. Him making Pong was basically just a tech demo to show people, and then the extras started using it. So like Nolan was not upfront about it at all. And but if he didn't do that, there's a good chance that Al Alcorn would not have come over, and then this company would have not gone anywhere. It would have probably just shut down.
Jeez.
So Al Alcorn would eventually come to be number 2. Now let's talk a little bit about Ted Dabney, who I was saying earlier, and it's kind of a sort of tragic story of what happened. So after the failure of Computer Space and the success of Pong, when Al Alcorn came on, Nolan felt Dabney was like no longer needing the company, and Dabney was kind of feeling like this push out. So he basically Nolan was not mentioning Dabney for like a bunch of successes that he had, and he kept him out of like high level meetings and basically demoted him as a second in command partner spot to just some other position in there that wouldn't be at the high level meetings. So Dabney decided, it feels bad. So Dabney decided to sell in 1973 his shares of the company for $250,000. And that wouldn't be the last time they would do work together, but it basically was the end of the Atari bridge there. So it's kind of a shame that that happened, but so now we have Atari, helmed by Nolan and Alcorn, and they would take Atari to the next level, which was consumer electronics. When they were making those arcades weren't like, people weren't buying those for their homes unless they're super rich. Those were at these cabinets or whatever, arcade games, whatever. These were at the arcade spots. You weren't bringing them at home. So getting to consumer electronic was like the next step for them. And so they're approached by two engineers, which I don't have much information on them, but their names were Bob Brown and Harold Lee. And they wanted to create a home version of Pong. However, making this, when he put it out there, they ended up, in order to get the capital and the funding that they wanted for it, it ended up being a Sears exclusive that was only sold through their retail store.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
However, it was a huge success. I mean, Pong was everywhere. It was like everyone wanted this at their house. They just attached it to the TV. What was it, like Channel 3 or something? Is that it could only play on?
Channel 3.
Channel 3.
Channel 3.
Yeah.
Put it on
That's
there.
the input channel.
Yeah. It is great. It's crazy. I mean, it worked out huge for them. But yeah, they were hesitant in the book that I was listening to. They definitely didn't want exclusivity, but they weren't gonna get the deal without it. And it's a good thing that they didn't bend, because Atari wouldn't be what Atari is. Well, what is left of Atari today if it wasn't for the success of Pong.
Yeah, I heard I think I read or listened to something that when they did have the arcade versions, they could not get the quarters out of them fast enough because they kept filling up and people couldn't play. Like, it was just insane. So
there's a certain part which I was trying to listen for this and I couldn't find it, but while Nolan Bushnell is there and they are working on these like Atari machines, like especially the Atari 2600, they're trying to like test it and find people to break the game. And one of the testers at the time that worked on this game, a kid was like in high school at the time, that managed to find the bugs and constantly like break the machine and find out all these issues that it had with it, which is what they wanted. And even when you try and fix it, he would always find a way to break it. Was a bright young kid. Do you guys want to take a guess of who you think it might be?
I already think I know this one. I believe I know this story. Isn't it? I'll let Sam guess.
Yeah, Sam guess.
Bro, don't put things up to me, man. I wasn't born. I don't know nothing about nothing.
This should have been Steve Jobs and Wozniak, and I'm pretty sure Jobs side paid Wozniak.
Well, I'll get to that later, but that's not the answer.
It isn't?
It's not. So the one that was testing these and everything, and this is like really pretty much the only interaction like with Bushnell and Atari. There's not really anything else, but it was Bill Gates.
No shit, I didn't know that.
They were like break this like system and doing stuff. So
wow,
I don't want to associate with like Bill Gates as a part of Atari, because no, not really. There's no interaction other than that. It'd be like play testing a game. He's one of the testers of it. So
I'll be damned.
But you have to mention it. Bill Gates comes on the scene, you got to mention it.
But that does bring us to the next one and everything, and I will get to these guys here in just a second. But many of the arcade games would be made under like Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn with Atari. There's a bunch of them coming out. And Alcorn was basically the R&D guy. He was the one like overseeing the actual development of this, as like Bushnell was the head of the company. He was setting up the deals, and he he would micromanage quite a bit on what was going on with the company. And it's actually like this relationship would grow to be a bit toxic between the two. You know, he already had this issue with Ted Dabney, who is now out, but now he's having issues with Alcorn because Alcorn would have like a vision and ideas that would contradict Nolan, and the two would get into arguments on like the direction that they'd want to go. In fact, Al told his employees that they couldn't do anything Bushnell told him to do unless he said it 3 times. Like that was the thing. Unless he said it to him 3 times, they couldn't do what Bushnell told him to. And so whenever he would come down and would like, you know, try and see things, Alcor would try and like steer him away or distract him or try and like, let's talk in my office, or, you know, just not let him get too nosy with what was going on, you know, with the development of it. But Bushnell did catch on to this, and he decided to get like an inside informant of the person who was working on the game. And he wanted to get someone that was low on the totem pole that Alcorn wouldn't have suspected. And that person was Steve Jobs.
Yeah, okay. I do remember this part a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of this stuff I got this, like this is almost like directly cut from like Wikipedia, just because I didn't want to get this wrong. I want you guys like to hear this exactly how it was written out. I mean,
it's pretty crazy story. Like,
yeah. So basically, well, there's a couple things. Like Steve Jobs got a job at Atari by taking some work that Wozniak did to Bushnell, and then they thought that he did the work, and that's how he did the job, but he didn't even do it, which I thought that was really like, really?
It's real shitty. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, so there's a lot of stuff that Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs had an interesting relationship.
Yeah.
But anyway, so here in 1973, Jobs was working for the arcade game company Atari in California. He was assigned to create a circuit board for the arcade game Breakout. According to Atari co-founder Nolan Bushnell, Atari offered $100 equivalent, or $100, which is equivalent to $564 in 2018, for each chip that was eliminated from the machine. Jobs had little knowledge of circuit board design and made a deal with Wozniak to split the fee evenly between them if Wozniak could minimize the number of chips. Now, I'm not going to go into all of Wozniak's backstory, but he is a computer freaking genius. Maybe we will one day go over it, but he was crazy, so ahead of his time. But yeah. Wozniak reduced the number of chips by 50 by using RAM for the brick representation, too complex to be fully comprehended at the time. The fact that this prototype also had no scoring or coin mechanism meant Woz's prototype could not be used. Jobs was paid the full bonus regardless. And Jobs told Wozniak that Atari gave him only $700, and Wozniak's share was thus $350 of it, which was about $2,000 in 2018, where basically Jobs actually got $5,000, which is about $30,000 2018, which he kept the rest. Wozniak didn't even find that out until 10 years later, which in this book, they said there's 2 occasions. One was he heard it like on a plane, and another was like it was at a party or something. It was talked about like, so what'd you do with that $5,000? You know, whatever they gave him. And so anyway, that's just one of the interesting stories of them at Atari. But anyway, that's just a little food for thought. And also, that's one I thought was pretty funny. We've talked about bad deals, but in 1976, Steve Jobs offered Nolan Bush a third stake in Apple for a $50,000 investment, and he said no.
That shit blows my mind. Damn, what a misinvestment.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, I mean, you'll hear about this later, but he invests in a lot of stuff, and I actually think that because of him not investing in this is part of the reason why he makes some of these decisions later, because he had that kind of money to spend, and he invested far more or a lot more money in some other companies that just didn't pan out the way this did.
Mm-hmm.
He even mentions at a certain point that whenever Steve Jobs was there, like he always felt like he was the smartest person in the room, and like he was valuable but difficult to work with, like Nolan's words with it. So
yeah, that's how everyone's described him.
Yeah, you think like something like that.
At my university, we actually had a guy. I don't remember exactly his name and everything, but he came in to talk to us, and he had gone to the university, but he was like one of the head of research and development at Apple for a long time during like the early iPhones, iPads, all that stuff, iPods, everything. And he said it was an interesting time, because he'd come in, and Steve would always be on edge and stuff, and like he'd never be totally happy with whatever you gave him.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I mean, the guy was efficient, but he was very, very ruthless. Anyway, so that's that. Basically, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, they go on to do their Apple things, but let's get back to the Atari side of stuff.
Yeah.
So Warren Communications is like the company that ends up kind of like being involved during this time frame. So while they're working on the Atari VCS, which was, what is it, video console system? Maybe that's what they called it. I can't remember. But anyway, the Atari VCS, which would be released as the Atari 2600. But Bushnell realized that like the market was like kind of losing its strength, and they were like short on cash, and so he's kind of looking for a buyout so they can kind of continue to make this stuff. And he reached out to a couple names, which the names escape me right now, and I didn't put in my notes. But one company that actually looked into and reached out to them was Warner Communications. So that was in 1977, and he paid $28 million to buy Atari. So with that new investment and that funding, it helped them to make the VCS. That same year, Nolan bought a company called Pizza Time Theater, and its the full name of this company was Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater.
Oh,
but it was
God.
Yeah. So, but here's what I don't understand. So apparently, this is what I take from this, because I read like 4 different articles, and it kept saying that Nolan Bushnell bought it from Warner Communications, or he bought it back. So, and then a lot of people say this was his pet project. So I think what happened was he started, while he's doing Atari, before Warner Communications, like it was called Chuck E. Cheese's Pizza Time Theater, because he wanted to, a lot of these arcade machines were going to like pool halls or like pinball clubs or arcades or where things like that. A lot of them ended up being a little adulty. He wanted something that was like just for kids. So this was his pet project for this, to put like arcades in there and like his Atari machines. He could also, like, if you were to expand this, like sell Atari to there, you would have nothing but Atari, all business strategy.
Oh, yeah.
So
it's actually pretty significant, yeah.
He makes that, but when he sold Atari to Warner Communications, that was also tied in with the deal, and then I think he just bought it back from them. So that's where they kind of like bring this in there. But that's what I gather what happened, because either that or he just didn't sell it at all. And so I don't know. I'm imagining he started this thing because basically from the beginning, it was going to be a Coyote, and it was supposed to be Coyote's Pizza, and then they had these animatronics, and the animatronic that they got wasn't a coyote, it was a rat. And so then he was going to call it Ricky Rat's Pizza, but they didn't like it, and so they settled on Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. So,
thank God, dude. Something do sound awful.
Yeah.
Ricky Rat. Yo, let's go down to Ricky Rats.
Right? And that's the same thing. Like, good thing he had like a marketing team there, because that was his idea. And they're like, no, we don't like that. And then Chuck E. Cheese was put in there. But I kind of look at it.
Isn't it the strangest thing about Chuck E. Cheese's is the older you get, the more you despise the place. But as a child, it was like a safe haven.
Oh, it was amazing. But like the one thing I look at is like Chuck E. Cheese. It's Chuck and then the letter E, Cheeses. Originally it was going to be Coyote, and I was thinking Wile E. Coyote, like the way that, and you have the Chuck E. input it. So I feel like there's some sort of correlation there of like how they ended up with the Chuck.
Someone had a brain blast in the middle of the
right
boardroom.
Again, teetering on like, borderline like copying stuff off of. Also, he had a love for Walt Disney, and there's rumors, but it was never confirmed, that he tried to apply and work at Disney multiple times when he was younger, but always got denied. Still loved it, but Chuck E. Cheese was kind of like with the animals there, and like live animatronics being kind of like Disney. So anyway,
hey man, that was a huge part of my childhood. Huh?
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Not long afterwards, though, in '78, Nolan was pushed out of Atari with a disagreement with Warner Communications.
Really?
Basically, what was going on here, both Nolan and Alcorn were kind of on the same page. Like, they really wanted to be inventive and push the industry forward. Whereas Warner Communications and then the person to take Nolan's position, Ray Kassar, were like, no, we're going to capitalize on what we have to its fullest potential. Like, we don't need to make another system. Like the Atari 2600 is fine. We don't need to make new games. The games we have right now are selling well. We just need to think about more ways of capitalizing on this. So Nolan pushed out in '78. 3 years afterwards, Alcorn would leave. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of numbers here, but it's just going to be quickly, just basically because this is basically the downfall of Atari. But since I want to follow Nolan and like kind of his adventures with Chuck E. Cheese, let me tell you what happens after they leave. So Warner found huge success with the Atari 2600 and the computer that they had, the Atari 400, selling millions of units, and by 1981 accounted for a third of Warner's revenue. And at the time, Atari was the fastest growing company in the history of the US. 1982, Atari had $1.3 billion in sales, which I thought was a crazy number. But with increased competition, saturation in the video game market, in 1983, what is known as the video game crash, which killed Atari like sales completely, leading to that infamous like truckloads of the ET and Pac-Man games being buried in a landfill there in New Mexico. It was like over 700,000 copies. I think it was like they were recently uncovered in like 2013. It was crazy.
Yeah, they did a documentary on it.
I need to watch that because it is pretty fascinating. But
I too, yes.
By 1984, Atari had crashed. They had split into 3 separate divisions, which all 3 were sold off. So, like one, like there's the Atari Games division, which is like what we see now when we type in Atari Games, and then some other ones that were like built in with some other companies that I don't really follow. But yeah, like 3 years after Alcorn left and 6 years after Nolan left, company goes from making 1.3 billion in sales in '82 to collapsing in '84.
Jeez,
crazy,
wild. But it was bad. Like '83 through '85 was horrible. Like people just weren't interested in games, and it's partly because Nolan and Al Alcorn here like were trying to push innovation, and no one wanted to do it. Just want to capitalize with what they had. So. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Like kind of Atari's end there, and we'll like Nolan, like after he sold it, it just seemed like, I mean, he was like pushed out like right afterwards, and whether it was like, it didn't seem like he fought either when they were trying to push him out, kind of thought that maybe you would fight a little bit more for your company, but I mean, he got $28 million. I think he bought like the Folgers mansion or something. One of the Folgers guys' mansion. So he had a nice house. Yeah, he was doing all right.
I think he did all right. Yeah.
Did all right. So here we are after Atari. Nolan is out, and but he's not quite done with the video game industry with the Pizza Time Theater, which I want to call it this more because like every time I was reading it, this is what they were calling it. Like it wasn't quite like the Chuck E. Cheese we know. I think it was more of like maybe small letters Chuck E. Cheese, but it was like Pizza Time Theater. Like that was what they were going for. But it was like spread out all through the West Coast. He made a he did a partnering with a company called Showbiz Pizza, which would expand into the Midwest. And so Nolan, as an entrepreneur, he wanted to keep like growing and keep expanding his reach. So he gave his day-to-day for the Pizza Time Theater to a guy called Joe Keenan, which I'm gonna have to tell you about this guy later on because he had some dealings with some stuff prior, but I just didn't know where I wanted to fit this in. So at the end of this, I'm gonna talk to you about Joe Keenan because this guy is kind of interesting.
Nice.
But he would continue on until 1983, and then he would resign after like loss in sales for the quarter, and then Nolan, not long after, would file the company for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and he like I don't want to talk more than Chuck E. Cheese since we're still following Nolan, but basically after his departure, eventually by 1995, Chuck E. Cheese Pizza would be like what we know it is as it today, or whatever's left of them. There's still Chuck E. Cheese's around, right?
Yeah,
they're still living.
They're still living.
Yeah,
still a quarter or a token a game, so it's kind of cool.
Yeah, but
do they use tokens still, or is it like the little cards now?
No, well, last one
Bitcoin.
I went to is a Bitcoin. Yeah, it's still a token.
Bitcoin.
I don't know that they are capable of upgrading to the card system. Like, I think they're so, old school with their shit.
Yeah,
I know I still have like a bag of like Chuck E. Cheese tokens somewhere in my house. Like,
that's
no
funny.
doubt in my mind, I bet there's one somewhere.
You try to go into one and they're like, "Sir, where's your child?" "Oh, no, I'm just going to play games." So.
Bring in like giant bag of tickets I used to have.
Yeah,
right.
The crazy thing is, like, as much as as Chuck E. Cheese was like a part of my childhood, I like barely remember my time there. It's been so long, you know.
Honestly, I don't really remember like a single game I really played there.
Yeah.
I remember like the play place a little. I remember the animatronics. I remember some of the crappy like ticket munching games and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
and even then, all I really remember is Chuck E. Cheese. I don't remember any of the other animatronics.
No, I don't remember a single other one than Chuck E.
I only know of it because I've had to go to kids' parties and shit recently.
Yeah.
So
I haven't been probably more than 10 years. It's all a blur. I agree, Grote.
So
as a child, I don't remember any of that.
I remember
stuff.
the pizza being good as a child, but I feel like it wasn't at all.
No.
Oh man. Yeah, no, I don't think it was very good.
This is what my mom used to do. So like to get me to do like work on like a homework or something or study for a test because I was just super distracted as a kid. I didn't want to do none of that. She'd take me to Chuck E. Cheese and it was like a deal we had. Like she'd like give me a token or like a certain amount of time, and then I'd have to come back and work on my paper or whatever it was for a certain amount of time, then go back and I could play again. I'll tell you, dude, that was clutch. That defined me being able to do stuff. Just this back and forth, and I got things done, man.
Dude, you were determined.
Yeah, because I'm like, dude, I want to play these games. I don't want to do this, so I'd like burn through it real good. She was a genius. I don't know how she ever thought of that.
Smart woman right there.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, this is like pretty much wrapping up because there's not Nolan has his hands in quite a few things, at this point, but it's not nearly as big as like Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. But like I said before, like always trying to expand his reach, always trying to do something new. And he started one of the very first tech incubators. Kind of like, I don't know if you guys have watched like Silicon Valley, but like what TJ Miller's character pitched his house as is like a tech incubator, and like you could live there for free, but if you start your company, like I get 10% or whatever. Anyway, he called it
so weird, bro.
Nolan called it Catalyst Technologies, and this brought companies like, which you probably don't know, but ETAC, Axion, Androbot, and Kuma.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Oh yeah, Rivers Kuma. I know him from Weezer.
That's He also engaged with some other companies that I don't believe are around anymore, but Scent Technologies and Cadabroscope. He would eventually sell almost all of these to cover the losses that he had with Pizza Time before they left there. But even though you probably haven't heard some of these companies, these are the few ones that I actually stood out. I was like, okay, this is interesting. ETAC was a company that made digital mapping that was essentially the backbone for Google Maps and MapQuest. So that was a huge one. And then Cadabroscope, he ended up selling to Lucasfilms in 1983, and this would eventually become Pixar. So I was kind of thinking like, he did have some hands in some good stuff. And when he sold them for a pretty good chunk of change. I think I think ETAC he sold for like 3.9 million or something. So
jeez,
all right,
he made some money with it. And so okay, that's what I got for like his hand. He had his hands in some other things here and there, but it was very small, and it just would have been a long list of some stuff that no one would have known or cared about. But
just kind of fizzling out as the years go by.
So where's Nolan Bushnell now? I mean, I imagine he's still sitting in his mansion. I would say with his 8 kids, but I think they're all probably grown and have their own families now. So maybe he's there by himself. His net worth is around $50 million, so he's definitely not hurting for money. He was inducted into the Video Game Hall of Fame and the Consumer Electronics Hall of Fame. Recently, he was nominated in the Game Developers Choice Pioneer Award in January of last year, but he was like unnominated because of it's like with the Me Too movement, and there's allegations of like sexism in the workplace when he was there with Atari. And so
the 80s.
And so
I remember when this happened, and he was like, yeah,
he's kind of like,
you know, he's like, it's cool, I understand.
It was kind of interesting because like there were some people that, like a couple women that like were talking about that he was like toxic, and like essentially the work environment that he started at Atari has just, that's how video games like went on from there, and it's kind of like the same deal. But then there's other women that are there, it's like, that's just, I mean, it wasn't like that's
a little far-fetched.
What they were doing. They were also saying like everyone was kind of there willing. Like, here's an example of one of the things that was talked about there. Like, they would have boardroom meetings in hot tubs. So, and then he would invite, like, you know, the women could come, and that's kind of like how he ran things, you know, with it. And so obviously inappropriate, but like those are the things that were talked about with it. It was like, that's how he did it. And at the time, I see where he was coming from. At the time, it's just like, he's like, whatever, this is my company, I'll do whatever the hell I want. There was like so many less guidelines as there are now, just even in the 80s.
I think as we start to dive into a lot of these old gaming companies and things, we'll get a bit of a reoccurring coincidences that
I'm sure
the way a lot of these guys run their companies is not very conventional.
It was a lot of sex, drugs, rock and roll, drinking on the job, doing whatever the fuck you wanted.
There's a lot
I mean, they were rock stars back then.
And like the head of gaming studios and directors and stuff, they weren't very normal. They're pretty crazy guys.
One of the things that I found interesting when in the video game history book, one of the quotes on there was that when they were doing the deal with Sears, Sears was the one that at first they reached out to them, and then Sears got interested, and then they wanted to come and visit them. And it's like the guys that were there to visit them were at their place at 8 a.m. and they're like, no one was at work at 8 a.m. they were there at 8 a.m. but no one else was there. This guy like walked in, and I just thought it was funny the way they talked about it. It's like it's supposed to be like business, but like a lot of these guys being interested in computers at the time was not a cool thing to do. So it wasn't like the business practices that we have today. It was just kind of like kids that were fascinated in hacking, and they did whatever.
Well, it was all brand new and stuff.
So,
a little side note with the whole pizza, all that crap. So I had watched I had watched a documentary about this guy had acquired one of those sets from Showbiz, like all the animals, and would play like music videos. I think he's got a YouTube channel, but at the time they basically had created like a modem system to update all of the stores at one, or restaurants at one time, so they could push new songs and new crap from like a central location, like really like before the internet really was a thing,
It's actually really impressive.
Impressive. I mean, it tanked horribly, but it was a cool deal that they had going, to be able to change them all at one time. And
I don't think I listed it on here, but one of the other like Catalyst Technologies ventures that he had was a company that was, this was back when like Laserdisc was a thing, but essentially you were going to be able to like buy a game. This kiosk would write the game on the disc there, and then it'd pop out the disc, and you would have that game. Like you'd buy it there, write on the disc, and give it to you. Back in the '80s, which I was like, that is.
They can still do that. It's just it's a big problem because let me just copy all these games for free.
Exactly, yeah. It didn't really take off. I don't think much happened of that. But I promise you guys one more story. And this is the story of one man called Joe Keenan and his involvement with this, which I thought was very fascinating. So I want to save him to the end because he's like the silent assassin to these companies that nobody talks about. So back in the 70s, before Warner bought Atari, Nolan was trying to increase his sales with Atari, but it was having a really hard time because all these like pinball arcades were wanting to get exclusive deals to put the machines in their place, and he couldn't give exclusive deals to everyone, you know? So he thought of an idea. He had a neighbor named Joe Keenan. So Nolan Bushnell and Joe Keenan one day, you know, hung out, had a couple of beers, and he came with an idea. So Keenan was going to open up a company called Key Games, and it was headed by Joe Keenan, but it was a subsidiary of Atari Games, and they would sell the exact same games but named differently. And so they would sell themselves out in the industry as like competing against each other, which they weren't. But that way you're able to get exclusive deals, like, you know, this place is exclusive with Key Games and this place is exclusive with Atari, but it's all going to Atari. So they did that, and basically when they went public and like they were bought up by Warner, that got shut down real quick. But now we fast forward to Chuck E. Cheese, and why I thought it was interesting that Joe Keenan again comes up to kind of like take the day to day from Nolan. So while Nolan's doing his own thing with these like this tech incubator and stuff and trying to get that up and going, while he's technically still head of Chuck E. Cheese, he assigned Joe Keenan as the role. And basically that was from like 81 to 83. And 83 is the year that they had a net loss of $15 million, leading up to the restructuring and filing for bankruptcy. So, whoops. Yeah, I just thought it was really fascinating because I tried to look up a bunch about Joe Keenan. I couldn't find much on him, but he's mentioned multiple times, like through Nolan Bushnell's career. So I don't know if this guy was just like an idiot or like I have no idea. Like it just
your frat bro coming in to take over the company while you're away.
Exactly. It's just he was there when Nolan needed him, and it was just I don't know. I thought it was funny. So essentially,
just think, man, the guy that created your Chuck E. Cheese also had hot tub meetings.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is getting dark.
You know, Mattel did the same thing with I think it was G.I. Joes. They sold. Well, actually, no, it was a similar, but they sold shittier versions of their own toy to compete to like kind of flush out all the crappy versions. So they're basically like selling two different products and quote unquote competing against each other, but they were just taking all the money. It's pretty bad.
So fascinating.
It's actually amazing. Yeah, I think it's good enough to like push out the other ones.
Like ibuprofen or like the grocery store ibuprofen knockoff. It's like made on the same conveyor belt. You know, it's all going in different bottles, but you just pay more for the ibuprofen.
So I found a lot of side note, but like a lot of manufacturers in China, etc., whatever. Like this company will pay a bunch to get R&D, get the plates made, all that stuff. Well, that same factory will just make the same shit for whoever wants. They don't have to pay anybody. They just make a very crappy version of it, and that's fine. That's why there's a lot of knockoffs all the time, like on electronics and stuff like that.
It's interesting out there. And Wild West of the 80s, all kinds of weird stuff went on. I mean, doing what they did was shady practice, and I don't think you could have done that like even in the 80s, but they did. Actually, they were having issues in like Japan and China trying to sell out there because of that very thing with the Key Gaming and Atari, just because the rules were a little bit more monitored, I guess, than they were in the United States at the time.
Yeah, they were just winging it. They didn't give a crap, They didn't know what the fuck they were doing.
Dude, video game history is greasy, and I love it.
It's so fascinating. Yeah, but like even and that's all I have as far as Nolan Bushnell. I mean, he's still alive, still kicking it, but yeah, just so interesting. Just
So
kind of hear
Nolan,
how
if you're
everything's going.
listening, chime in on Twitter how wrong we were and complain a bunch. So there's a bunch of articles about us, and then we get all
Right.
the negative press. Everyone will hate us, but it's any press is good press. So help us out.
Exactly.
Well, he does follow me on Twitter, so I could just DM him.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Isn't that the weirdest shit? I don't know why he
That
follows
is
me.
weird. Yeah.
And he follows like 46,000 people, but why me of all people? It's
You
so
done
weird.
good, Curtis. You're one of the chosen ones.
It's like
You're
one
going
of the
to
bizarre
ascend
ones.
to Chuck E. Cheese heaven when the time
Exactly.
comes.
Yeah. Rashida Jones's dad follows me too. God damn, I can't remember.
Really?
Yeah, it's
That's wild.
I cannot remember his name.
Of like the people that follow me on Twitter, like the game follows me, which I don't know how or why. But he also follows like 1 million people. So like how I feel in that category, I probably like tweeted at him one time and are just a follow.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only one I can like think of is like I think I have some like random Simpsons writer following me, or he retweeted my thing for like no reason a long time ago.
Oh yeah,
it's weird.
I was like, huh?
Yeah, I've had a couple random minor viral things, but nothing. I don't know what the hell I tweeted that caused it. So that's just it's funny.
Oh man, weird. Dude, crazy times. I mean, yeah. I love like listening to this because like just with everything going on in video games, and the thing is, a lot of the stuff like almost seems like it could or is about to repeat itself, especially with the video game crash. I mean, it is a very saturated market right now, and games are getting more expensive to make, and there's like very few that are like such a commercial success that it's able to pay for its employees. So, and with all these like streaming services now, people aren't necessarily selling it. I don't know. It could be interesting in the next few years. So I'm curious to see.
Yeah,
we might have to do one. Sorry, I don't want to keep interrupting, but we might have to do one like on the actual video game crash, like just specifically on everything that went there, because it only really happened in America because the China markets were fine. It wasn't hurting over there.
Yeah, it's an interesting story on how ET, like, which is the most infamous game of that whole thing, got pushed and everything, and it kind of blows my mind how many people were sent. Like, you have Jobs, Wozniak, you have Gates, like Nolan Bushnell, all this talent, like that cross paths in this weird way, and then look at where we're at now. It's fucking incredible. Like, who would have known? Dude. Yeah.
No,
all this whole discussion has made me want to do is take I have a Commodore 64 in the garage, and I have no clue if it works or not, but I want to just take it out and try and revive it and just see what is on that ancient brick.
Dude, you really should.
That.
Yeah,
figure out a way to control
stream it.
Stream some Commodore games.
That is wild.
An HDMI to it somehow.
We used to have an Atari 2600, and I don't know what happened to it.
Screw using an emulator, bro. I'm gonna straight connect my Commodore.
No, just put a camera on it. That'll probably be the easiest. Just stream
there
a
you
webcam.
That would be. Are you? It sounded like you were yawning and laughing, but also about to sneeze.
I was, dude. I was. Minus the sneeze part. I was yawning and laughing.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really interesting story. Like, man, I want to know what other CD stuff, in the video game history.
Man, there's much worse than this. This was a tame tale compared.
Yeah, this is pretty tame compared to some stuff we have. But it's not even just going to be like the history of gaming. It will cover history, but it's not going to be like old history necessarily either. Like, there's some interesting stories of people like in recent times too. After 2010 that I want to talk about, and
I feel like we just want to talk about things that interest us, and like it's fun to learn about and share it with other people.
We have some we basically have a pipeline going on right now. So we have some in the works now, but I'm not yet comfortable to say next week's is going to be about this. But we will get there. Eventually, we get to the point where we'll be able to tell you what's also coming up the following week.
Yeah, so I may be missing the next 1 or 2. I'm not sure exactly when I get back. I'm going to be in Alaska. So
that's exciting. You pretty pumped for that?
Yeah, bro. I'm going to get eaten by a bear.
I can't believe it's so hot that you got to go to Alaska, though. That's pretty crazy.
Seriously.
Yeah, dude, it's hard times out here, man. The Great Lakes, they're drying up.
the Great Salt Flats.
I'm going to be licking the glaciers for survival.
Well, I hope you have a good time, man. Yeah, it looks like a beautiful place.
Thank you.
Yeah, take lots of photos and fun times.
Oh yeah.
So we may be missing you, but next week we'll have our other co-host Sean.
So
and hopefully the
you're
one
prepared
after
to hear another lie about me being in Alaska rooting for microtransactions or something. I don't know.
I mean,
the story just writes itself.
I'm
kind of disappointed we didn't come up with what Sean's doing this time.
Yeah. So Sean, he's I don't know if you guys ever heard of Florida Man, but Sean's actually Florida Man. Yeah,
that's him.
That's him. He's Florida Man. Those that you don't know, don't Google it because it'll bring up scary things.
Yeah.
No, actually, the only thing that I know, I don't feel like Florida Man is supposedly some guy that does all this shit in Florida, but they talked about it in the show Atlanta. he's saying Florida Man does this for him. It's just that's fake, right? And later on the show, it actually has Cat Williams. He's like, what do you think? I'm crazy? I'm not Florida Man. And you kind of look at each other I told you it was real. I told you it was the thing. But that's all I remember.
That's funny.
Bro, I think we should do an episode later on of just Florida Man, our top 10 favorite Florida Man stories.
There we go.
when we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
I don't think we will. There's plenty to talk about. We'll get through it.
Nah, man, I hope we survive long enough that we have to talk about Florida Man.
There we go. It's 100 episodes. That 9 seasons, 199 episodes.
Yeah,
how long it takes to talk about Florida Man.
And we're still getting 50 listens a week.
Well, this one, and along with our previous one, will be on YouTube. So hopefully we get some more.
If you're listening on YouTube, send me hate comments and I'll argue with you in the comments in one of my profiles that don't match my actual name.
There you go. You heard it here first. Argue in the comments. But no, if you guys did get this far, we appreciate you listening. Give us feedback. Let us know what you think. We're always looking to get better, and we joke about it and everything, all this stuff. But we do this because we like to. We're not paid to do this, so we enjoy talking about video games. And I always found the history of video games fascinating, along with the rest of these guys. And so we just want to give you a little bit of insight, little bit of gaming news outside of Fortnite nowadays. It's don't aspire to make $3 million in Fortnite. Don't aspire for more.
Yeah, dude. Video game news these days is too depressing. We need some enjoyable stories.
Yeah. So, you guys got anything else?
No.
I'm gonna go play more Fire Emblem. That game's really good. I'm addicted. I'm gonna marry the Pope.
Well, Curtis and I are.
Yeah, I gotta go run and get some workout on.
You don't have to go work out because then you're gonna put me to shame. Just go ahead and take the day off.
I hit my goal already, so everything's bonus at this point.
I know. I hate you. All right, I gotta run for a long time. Then I'll take brain.
Yeah, right.
It'll be all right. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the Wordness to the Nerdness podcast. We will be here again next Thursday. Until then, stay nerdy, friends.
Bye.
I actually thought I was going to forget that because I didn't have it in front of me. And usually I read it. So I'm going to fuck this up.
You're still recording, by the way.